bad.
All right.
You guys are in the right place for puns of that scale. Okay,
Right.
like Ludwig, like can you? It's like a medical condition. You have to make a pun that is of that quality at least every 10 minutes, right?
Exactly. Otherwise, bad things happen to me.
Oh, we're going to be comfortable here then. This is going to be great.
You're in good company. All right, let's get this beast rolling. It's officially 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, July 8th. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Joystiq Streams, brother. Oh yeah! You're about to snap into the beefy, juicy taste of a 1-hour stream of Guacamelee. All right, wait. It's super.
Well, there's an exclamation mark at the end. It should be Guacamelee!
Super Turbo Championship Edition.
Note that the word turbo is on fire.
Yes.
Well, it's important that every word of the title has its own personality, its own meaning, its own significance.
You guys are hearing the sweet dulcet tones of not just Joystiq's own editor-in-chief Ludwig Kitzman, who's going to be playing Guacamelee for us today, but a couple of the fine folks from DrinkBox Studios, the guys that made Guacamelee. We have Mr. Jason Canham, who's one of the designers of the game.
Hey, everybody.
And we also have Matthew. Matthew, how do you pronounce your last name?
Johns.
All right.
Yeah.
So
That didn't really seem that difficult.
I took a
That really caught me
gamble.
off guard.
I took a gamble with Jason's last name.
You nailed it, and a lot of people don't get it right.
I have a little history here.
Sorry, how is that pronounced? Honey? Is that your name?
Aunt Honey is my name. Yes, I'm Aunt Honey, John Agnello. I'm Joystiq's community manager, and I'm hanging out with all y'all today. And Jason, I took a gamble on your name because every single time we've ever had a guest of the show, I have successfully managed to mispronounce the name.
Oh, you nailed it.
I'm
honored.
I started to doubt my luck, and I was like, just ask Matthew how to pronounce his name because it might be Jones, and like that, like
I do get called Jones sometime.
Really?
And it really bothers me.
I get called AJ sometimes, and I want to be like, do I look like a Sopranos character? And the problem is that the answer is yes, I do, but that just doesn't. That is not helpful. All right, so this version of Guacamelee is only a week old. Yes.
Yes.
Fresh and out in the world of PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and PC and Wii U and every other machine under the sun. And this version is an upgraded version of the version of Guacamelee we saw last year. There's new moves, there's new levels, and all that kind of jazz, right?
Yes, it is. We tried to make all the new content as overarching as possible. We tried to make it more than anything significant. So we wanted to make sure there's a lot packed in this edition, like the title implies. It's a really crammed title, and it's a really crammed update to the game.
So, all right, Ludwig, you're right at the beginning, right?
Yeah, this is shortly after you get your power, because you start as Juan, who is a very nice man, but the villain kills him immediately, and he gains this luchador power. And I'm busy punching skeletons in your home.
Yeah, I think we wanted to have the credits roll after Juan died, just to make players think they did something wrong or something. They shouldn't be dying there, but I think we decided against that a long time ago.
So, like, even at this point, what is somebody who played Guacamelee last year? What are they seeing right here that is different?
Sure. Well, right off the bat, you kind of chose a good place to start. Actually, all of the enemies, the skeletons that are running rampant around the town right now, is new to this edition. This didn't exist in the previous version of the game. You had a character in the barrel telling you that skeletons have ambushed the town, they're running around, but there actually weren't any. So you were kind of given this urgency of, quick, get to the church, save everybody from these skeletons, but none existed. So that's one of the things we fixed, is now the town actually is being overrun by enemy skeletons.
I also noticed a new billboard. I think if you go to the right a bit, there's a purplish kind of billboard. Oh, I'll wait till you do this part. But there's a purplish building outside, which I think references a Toronto-made game called They Bleed Pixels, done by Miguel Sternberg. And we're a pretty tight-knit group of developers here in Toronto, indie developers. So I think we threw that in there for the newest version.
All right, now I understand that there is a drinking club
There is.
in the Toronto scene. What is the name of this again?
Toronto. I think it's something put together by the Khaki guys to kind of like give developers a place to talk about games, kind of like how they do in Japan. Hence the Japanese kind of name.
Matthew, it seems like we're getting a little bit of an echo on your voice now. Have you moved or?
Oh, maybe. What if I talk like this?
All right, that sounds okay. That sounds very good.
Okay.
Actually, I am interested to hear. Are there does everybody get tight-lipped in the development community in Toronto? If you're all out drinking, do you ever have that moment where somebody throws out an idea and all of a sudden is like, oh, wait a second. I don't want to talk about that too much. I am surrounded by people who will use that.
No, the community is an incredibly friendly one and a very collaborative one. That actually doesn't happen, I would say often, but I'm more inclined to say at all. Really, it is a closely knit community of developers in Toronto, and like I said, it's very collaborative and cooperative. Everyone kind of works together. Really, the events that are put together, like Toronto, are more social events. Just a chance to kind of get together, ask how you're doing, making sure we're all keeping each other sane. But no, I don't think anyone's ever been afraid of talking about what they're working on. In fact, some indie developers will even show up with laptops with builds of their game on it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I feel like there were, in the past, it was far more difficult to find an active community of people who are working on games all at the exact same time and able to really communicate with each other. If you were in a place, like say you're based in Santa Monica back in the early aughts, you'd be in a situation where there'd be a whole lot of people in the same community, but they'd be locked into publisher-owned studios that they weren't able to just sort of freely communicate and collaborate with each other. Do you feel like the setup in Toronto is this the wave of the future? Is this how games are going to be made, where everybody congregates and is able to work with each other freely?
Well, for Toronto, and the reason why the indie scene kind of really thrived and exploded in Toronto was, for the longest time, you had hundreds of people in the city wanting to make games, and there were no studios to do so. There was always kind of an emptiness of AAA studios. The AAA studios in Canada were always in Vancouver and Montreal. And so there was just so many people saying, I want to make games, and the solution came to be that let's all band together and start making games with each other. And it just made the perfect environment for these tiny little developers to start making these creative games.
So, just a little note for everybody watching. Not only are we playing Guacamelee, and this is the Xbox One version.
We just finished punching a bunch of chickens.
Well done.
Into their place. Into their place. They deserve.
You hate birds is really is what you do, right? You're jealous of their abilities of flight.
I appreciate when wrestling moves are applied to poultry.
It is a unique moment when you get to suplex a chicken. Everybody watching, we do have many codes to give away for not just the PlayStation 4 version of Guacamelee Turbo. I was about to say the full name, and I was like, I can't do it, because I'm going to put a word in there. I'm going to say EX Plus at the end of it, and that's not going to be appropriate. We also have codes for the Xbox One version, and keep an eye on the chat. Keep an eye on the chat, because many of these codes are just going to appear, and they are first come, first serve.
Oh, so I wanted to head back to this town real quick, because we were going to talk about some of the posters, and are shadows new to this version of the game?
We also wanted to make the game look a little bit better on the next-gen systems. We had some bandwidth to add some more particle effects, like you can see those beams of sunlight shining down. They look really pretty. and shadows too, to all the enemies and the characters and NPCs. It just adds a bit more depth to what you're looking at. And we added a bunch of new posters too, with new levels and new areas that we need to populate with new things. So games we like, games that influenced us, and hopefully players enjoy that stuff.
Matthew, we're still getting a lot of echo on your voice and fading in and out.
Okay. I'm gonna move back from my PC.
Gotcha.
I like this poster because it's Majora's Mask and Mega Man.
Mega Hombre and El Mascara.
What is that? Mega Hombre and La Mascara.
So this is like I'm very interested in how you guys came to this style, because there is a very distinctive brand of background humor that moves across all of DrinkBox's games. So why these sort of like very obvious and like playful little nods in the background? It's in Mutant Blobs, it's in this. Why?
That is entirely that's due to the flavor of the personalities of the people in the studio. Specifically, the art team gets to do a lot of that. And I mean, it's just the way when they're building these worlds, when they're creating these levels, or the set dressings for the levels, it's kind of like their own personality shining through. We're big fans of puns. I mean, we're also big fans of games. So we like to make sure that stuff is in there.
Jason, tell me a little bit about the history of DrinkBox. You know, how did the studio come together? You know, who knew who? Where did the studio come from?
Sure, absolutely. The studio was founded a few years ago, and it was founded from the fallout of a studio that was in Toronto called Pseudo Interactive that worked on the Full Auto series of games back on Xbox 360 and PS3. And after that studio shut down, like I said, in Toronto had this healthy collaborative environment of developers. A few of the developers from that studio decided that they would start their own studio. And they began to work on these creative, colorful, interesting, download scope games. The founders of the studio are very experienced developers who have been in the AAA space. They've worked on mid-sized games, large-scale games, and they had a very clear vision for what they wanted to do with the studio.
Yeah, we didn't start out making our own games. We actually did contract work for other studios as we grew our team, just to kind of make ends meet, just to pay the bills. But I think the goal was always to start making our own games.
Matthew, I'm curious about how you move from that process. You know, what is the moment that a studio says, we've made enough, like we have enough stability, like we've done the contract work. How do you decide, like, this is the moment that we're going to try and make our own thing? We're going to get our own intellectual property out there. It's going to be our game.
Well, I think it was on the tip of our lips for a while. But we really got a big boost from Sony's Pub Fund. I think About a Blob was part of the Pub Fund program, and it gave us a lot of capital to work with to kind of gamble on like making our own games. And the game turned out pretty good, and it seemed like we could make another one. We had enough bandwidth to do that. So yeah, I guess it was just a bunch of money from Sony. But it's not everybody's story.
Even that's a unique situation, though. You know, like, do you think that it was just an issue of timing that all of a sudden, like, Sony could back something like that?
Well, it was a climate of both having something that you feel confident enough about, and yeah, there is an element of it being a perfect storm of, like, you know, Sony themselves coming up with their new policies, and Sony was actively reaching out to independent developers and trying to nurture developers. And with a studio like DrinkBox having something they feel really good about, and kind of wanting to really bring that to life.
Yeah, for a while there, Sony had a pretty aggressive campaign to recruit really interesting games by indies. And I think it's paid off for them.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like that was a priority. I'm also interested in how, that push to get these sort of very, very interesting, odd little games made by odd little studios, tied in with the fact that they were like wanting to push the Vita at the exact same time. And DrinkBox's games have a history with the PS Vita. They've branched out. About a Blob and Mutant Blob's Attack and Guacamelee are now all available on multiple machines, but all of them feel very, very tied to that portable.
Yeah, because the Vita was meant to be like a Mutant Blob's Attack exclusive platform. We were lucky enough to be a launch title, and that gave us a lot of visibility that we weren't really used to. But yeah, Mutant Blob's Attack was supposed to work with like motion controls and touch controls that the Vita offered. And it was a small game, so you could just pick it up and play it, and like take it with you as you went commuting or whatever.
Are we ever going to see the new edition of Guacamelee on Vita?
It's possible.
It's possible.
The 4 platforms we were working on were a lot of work. We'll see.
So what's interesting is this also came out on Xbox 360, but you can't self-publish on that system. So I believe it's published by Activision on there.
Really?
It is, yes. Yeah, we worked with...
It's kind of like an odd leftover of the old systems, is the fact that you can't self-publish very easily.
Yes, that was different to how we've done things recently. But, it helped us reach out to that platform. Our goal with the game was to get it on lots of new platforms, get lots of new players, kind of have as many people as possible experiencing the game.
Yeah, when you...
So if you're a Metroid fan at this point, there's some recognizable imagery happening right now.
I am curious how, what was the genesis of Guacamelee? Because the shift from the Blob games to this is, you can tell this is you guys. You can tell this is a DrinkBox game. They feel similar. There's a very distinct sort of flow to movement, but this is so much more elaborate. And how did you make the shift from Mutant Blob's Attack to Guacamelee?
Well, firstly, thanks for mentioning that about the games being part of the identity, because that's really important to a developer. That, the games a developer creates have their kind of signature stamp on it. Feel is a very tough thing to nail down. And so actually, I'm really happy to hear that you're saying that the games feel like DrinkBox, and to hear something feels like DrinkBox is really great.
It feels confident. I feel like when the poses that Juan assumes and the way he moves imparts a feeling of confidence. But when you actually start moving too, it just feels like it just feels effortless. It feels very fluid, and that makes you play confidently too. I don't really get stuck and look at things very often in this game because I just want to keep moving.
Yeah, Juan is a really purposeful run animation, like he just run through a wall or something.
But making the leap, I think that with About a Blob and Mutant Blob's Attack, the games, they felt confident because we felt confident about how they controlled, about how it felt. But perhaps it wasn't exactly targeting the audience of console players. So maybe we just decided that it was important that we do something that was maybe more ambitious. And lucky for us, very early into the process, our lead animator had the concept for Guacamelee, and everybody kind of immediately gravitated to it and understood that it was something special. It was really cool in that we instantly felt really good about what we had very early on in the process.
We were also pretty sick of blobs, after 3 years of making blob games. We kind of needed to cleanse the palate with something new.
How do you maintain interest in something like that over a long period of time? I understand the need to say, all right, it's time to cleanse the palate, it's time to approach something different. But game development takes so much time. And DrinkBox seems like you guys seem like you're able to turn around games in a relatively timely manner. Your development time on Guacamelee originally was 2 years?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
2 years, and that's speedier than a lot of people are able to work. How do you maintain interest in a project for 2 years, and how do you maintain interest in a franchise if you're working on multiple games back to back?
Well, in terms of like working with Guacamelee, so my specific role was I did level design.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, throughout the process of development, I came into Guacamelee late in its development, and I chiefly handled executing the side quests, like the wrangling chickens you did a few minutes ago, and some of those side quests in the game. So immediately afterwards, I went to work on the DLC for Guacamelee, and then immediately began constructing new levels that eventually became Super Turbo Championship Edition. And my motivation was always striving to make something new and unique. So I was always going through crazy ideas of, what if we have a level where the entire thing is spinning? What if I just start doing this? And the experimentation with the level design is how I was able to keep interest. I kept trying new and unique things. And eventually those, like I said, turned into new levels that became Super Turbo Championship Edition.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, there's not much of a time window between when we're done and happy with what we've made and like release. We're constantly trying to improve parts of our game. There's not a lot of us, so it takes a bit of time. And when you're always working on something and trying to make it better, I guess it just naturally takes your attention, and you're inspired to do better things.
It's probably worth saying that Guacamelee also, it becomes a really, quite a challenging platforming game. It's not just about combat and exploration. Especially when you unlock some of the optional areas, it is quite a finger gymnastic challenge, which I really appreciated about it.
Yes.
We hear about that a lot on Twitter.
we do. The funny story about that was, before the initial game's release, there was an interview that the studio did with a local Toronto newspaper, and one of the stories that came from that was it was just before release, and we were having a team meeting, and I stopped the meeting and told everybody that I had trouble sleeping the night before because I was really worried the game was too easy. I was like, guys, this game's too easy, and I'm losing sleep because of it.
Why were you worried that it was too easy?
I don't know. It's always the way I've worked. It's always the way I've done. I don't know. I don't like the idea of releasing something that's really easy. I don't like games that are too easy.
I think it's because...
But also, I do have a skewed perspective, of course. So, luckily, everyone else in the team that could see much more clearly than I was like, no, you're crazy.
Yeah, I think it's because when we, as we iterate, we'll play test what we've made, and based on those play tests, we'll make things a little bit easier. Well, at least in Guacamelee's case, we had to make things easier because some players are just having too much difficulty. And as Jason was seeing his baby just getting slowly smaller and smaller, he got a little worried.
Oh man, I love Combo Chicken.
Combo Chicken's important to the game. As far as we're concerned, a lot of people have mentioned, they comment on Combo Chicken, and some people say that, the combos you learn at Combo Chicken aren't really applicable to the game, especially the longer ones. But really, through Combo Chicken, what we were trying to do was trying to just show people that the way you fight enemies in the game is control the space. You can move them to the side with a 3-punch combo. You can lift them up. You can push them back down. It's really about how you not only attack enemies, but how you move them around the space.
Not really, because to me, I thought it was just another ridiculous challenge that we forced players to do.
God, that last blitz where you're trying to climb, you're trying to ascend a tower. It's one of the optional things near the end of the game. And it almost gets to Super Meat Boy levels of brutality, where you're trying to dodge through and air dash through these spikes and saws, and it's just impossible. And it's so worth doing. And the funny thing is when I was playing through that in the original version of Guacamelee, I had to do it on PlayStation 3. I needed to do it with a big controller. I couldn't manage it with smaller buttons on the Vita. And I'm curious, how do you sit there and balance not just like the difficulty of the game is, all right, well, it makes sense. I know why this level is hard from a design standpoint, but how do you sit there and just say to yourself, like, wow, actually physically using a controller might be too hard? Like, the design and the physical activity of actually beating the challenge, how do you balance that?
Sure. I mean, there are some quote-unquote scientific ways you can measure that. I mean, there are simple things like button presses per second, or the distance between different buttons on the pad and how often you're having to press them. Like, you can make quantifiable measurements on that, but really it just comes down to feel, but understanding what you're asking the player to accomplish and how you're communicating that to them. So saying, like, can someone process, I'm running up the side of a wall super fast, and then all of a sudden we're just going to have spikes come right from the top of the screen they're going to run into without being able to see unless they jump off the wall instantly. And usually just by describing it like I did just now, you can stop and go, no, that'd be stupid. That'd be too much. That'd be asking too much. And really, you always have to ask yourself, are you asking too much of the player?
And if you don't know the answer to that question, we just play test and see how people respond to it.
But it's so part of the satisfaction, especially with how it ties back into the level design. I think there's one level where you sort of go up this tree and then you reach the other end and then you sort of just plummet down on the other side, if I remember correctly. And it's just so you actually understand how much ground you traversed in that one area and how long it took you when you just fall down on the other side.
Yes, thank you for noticing. Yeah, that is really cool.
It's not the most graceful way to get back to the beginning of a level, but it works.
Everybody, we're going to take a quick break for 30 seconds. If you're a Turbo member, you're not going anywhere. We'll see you in a second. All right. I love the giant talking head. I am a huge fan of the giant
the Olmec statues.
I'm curious how much of what is in Super Turbo Championship Edition, how much of this was stuff that just couldn't be included in the first version due to time constraints? Was this stuff a lot of, like, we need to finish the game and get it out there, and maybe later we could put this in an update or downloadable content, and how much of it is brand new?
Sure. Some of it, anything that falls under the polish category, like Matthew pointed out back in town, every level has gotten a second kind of art polish pass. Little subtle things you may not notice, like there's more layers of rain that are falling outside of the temple here. There's more foreground layers of objects, there's more particles, and that was the art team just saying, like, if we had a few extra months, we would have done that. In terms of the level content, that was created entirely afterwards. After we had decided that this version of the game was something we wanted to do, we set about creating brand new levels.
So as a level designer, was there anything that when you looked back and all of your fears about too easy or balancing issues had been waylaid and people were actually playing the game, was there a way that you approached this differently in designing new levels? Did you say, well, we know that this is how people actually play Guacamelee once it's out in the wild? Not even just play testing it on your own. This is how people play out there. How did that change the approach?
I'll handle this one. No, I'll let Jason, the level designer, handle that one.
Sure, gladly. In terms of the level design approach, it was really just, what can we give players that's fresh and new? And it was not quite leftover ideas, but it was taking the mechanics that existed and then thinking, like, how can we make this something? How would I have made it more interesting? And some of the things that were done were taking these arena combat sections. There's a lot of these in the game. You're locked into a room. You've got to defeat all the enemies. And I was like, how can those be made more interesting? So in the new levels of the game, like the canal, you fight a bunch of enemies while you're floating on a raft. In the volcano, you fight a bunch of enemies in a room while parts of the room are moving around and shifting.
I hate that room.
So I thought this was really interesting, where we teach the sort of dimension hopping mechanism, but you use it with fixed points in the environment at first before you can trigger it yourself, which is pretty.
Yeah,
neat.
exactly. It's very important in the way you use game mechanics and the part of teaching the player. Exactly, like kind of what I refer to as like mechanics escalation, which is we have a game mechanic about dimension swapping. So the first time you see it, you don't have direct control over it. You have to use these points. Like you said, they're fixed points. They're specifically placed throughout the world to mostly be in like an optimal position. And then later on, we kind of take those away and we give you the freedom ability to do it. And all the mechanics in the game are kind of dealt with that way. Is like you introduce something, you show it at its most basic concept, and you kind of ratchet up the complexity as the game goes on.
Also, this is a really good tease of this giant monster. You're kind of like walking around him and
I love the Alebrije.
waking him up.
I do love the part where you punch the block and he stirs awake ever so slightly.
Yeah.
The first time I played this little section, they had animated that character, they had set him up, and I went through and punched the block and saw him wake up, and I actually panicked for a moment. And I was like, wow, I hope we get that reaction from most players.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's an awesome moment when you're actually surprised by the game that you yourself are working on.
Yeah, exactly. And we have lots of opportunities where, like myself, I will build something and then just without telling anybody about it, and I'll hand it off to a few people and say, try this. And try to see if I can elicit the reactions I want, whether or not they're scared, they're psyched. And usually that'll kind of gauge on whether or not I'll keep building and refining or if I'll just abandon, like, that was terrible. Which most often when I build a new room, someone just dies in it 30 times and says, you're me.
I'm actually very curious what didn't work at all. What were ideas that you guys wanted to get into Guacamelee that just they didn't happen? You thought they were going to be a good idea and that just didn't happen.
One thing that I was really disappointed that didn't make it into the game was chicken super moves. In the game, you can turn into a chicken if you don't know. It's like your Metroid ball. This is a Metroidvania. And we experimented giving the chicken like an uppercut, like Juan gets, or a slam move. But it was just really buggy. When you did these super moves in like little spaces, you would fall out of the world, and you'd have to like redesign the whole game around those moves. But so we just decided to cut it. We give the chickens a Pollo Bomb, which is like your Metroid bomb. I'm glad that made it in.
There is, beyond that, like, kind of really it was the scope of the levels. One of the new levels that was added to the game, the first version of it that I had built, I think I took about 3 weeks. And I built this big level, and I got people to test it, and it was taking people upwards of 2 hours to play through the level.
Wow.
And then it was just like, it's too big. And then I was like, no, but I did everything. And it was just, it was massive in scope. It was clearly out of control. But luckily, through the process of iteration, we were able to pick out what the best parts of it were, what worked, what didn't, and kind of it was condensed into something that was much better, because more isn't necessarily better. And then we just decided, like a quality over quantity approach. So
the quantity over quality approach seems to be a failing in a lot of attempts to do that, like Metroidvania style. Some people think like, oh, I need the biggest world. It needs to be the grandest thing. When like a tighter level seems to be more rewarding sometimes. Like, what's the secret to developing the most satisfying interconnected world?
Sure. One of the important things is to make sure the players. It sounds easy and it sounds simple, but making sure the player's never bored. And usually that's what happens, like I said, with a giant 2-hour level I built. The problem is that eventually you were seeing repeating concepts. You were seeing like, oh, I get it. This is the third time I'm doing a room with this in it. And so you definitely want to keep, and that's why you're exactly right. Like, it's not all about quantity. It's not all like a giant sparse world with corridors that go on forever. You want it to be really tight. And if you can have something new happening in every room, which is, I think, one thing we've definitely tried to do with Guacamelee, which is that, there are not 2 rooms in the game that are the same.
Is there a temptation to recycle, to say, all right, well, we've already done this one challenge, let's do it again, but just make it harder? Like, how do you resist that urge?
Well, most often, anytime you try to do that, you will be called out on it. Anytime we've even tried to mask it, hide it, usually a playtester will go like, wait, I seen this. And they'll catch it right away.
Yeah, even in studio, like giving feedback to each other, we're pretty honest about what works, what doesn't, and what's boring after like the second time.
Yeah, and you'll always get called out on it. It's always very noticeable. It stands out.
Luddy, what is the key to a good Metroidvania when you're playing? What do you want when you play an exploration game like this?
For me, I think there has to be a coherence to it. And Guacamelee has it because all of your combat moves also apply to traversal. And that you don't have to think about two separate systems or separate what you're doing in the game to different parts like fighting and exploration. That and momentum. I think like if you ever get too drawn into backtracking and going back and checking your map, it can feel disruptive and it can kind of just ruin the feel of the game.
What kind of considerations did you have to go through in preparing Guacamelee for co-op? Because making a game that feels as natural with two people as it does with one is a tricky proposition. That doesn't always work. And especially with something like Ludwig was just talking about, where momentum is so much a part of what's happening. You know, we're making sure that, you know, the movement of the character like is not just combat based or navigation based. It's both at the exact same time. How do you make that work with two?
Sure. Well, like you said about always kind of keeping that forward momentum is really important. And like with co-op, it's tricky because it's tougher to predict the movements of two players as opposed to one. So there are certain things we have to take into account. Like when you play two players, the scene transitions happen quickly. When one player snaps to a new camera, it automatically brings the other player with them. And that's very important to always maintaining that forward momentum. If player one got to the edge of a screen, you had to wait for player two to catch up as well. That would be detrimental to that forward momentum.
What is something that the average player just won't think about that goes into the creation of a game like Guacamelee? You know, you have to think about like, oh man, how are these two characters that people are controlling independently from one another going to interact? You have to think about that, and the average person who just picks it up and starts playing probably won't. So, what is it? What is something that people just don't think about?
Sure. Like I said, it's about the way that you have to set up the game is you have to understand how two people will approach it as opposed to one. And the game, I mean, fundamentally, the way it's set up is that there's rooms, there's enemies, and it's very easy to tell. Well, one person's going to come in from this direction. They're probably going to go up to here, so that's where we're going to set enemies. But the second you have two, all of a sudden you have to realize, well, one of those two people could be moving different from one another. You're now going to have them come from two directions. And that can completely, like, there are rooms in the game that, on a first pass, the second a second person is introduced, it totally breaks it. It's like, wow, all of a sudden a skeleton standing on this platform makes no sense anymore. You can so easily sneak behind him with a second person. So you have to take that kind of stuff into account, and that's always the stuff that gets you. Or you're like, oh, I want someone to go into here and pull a switch. But then you're like, what if second player doesn't go to the switch? What if player one goes to the switch but player two steps behind? And then you realize, oh yeah, they can get in a situation where they can trap themselves or something.
We also had to adjust the health of enemies in co-op play. If we just left it as is, like, enemies would just explode all the time because there's 2 times the damage being done. So once the second player jumps in, their health goes up by a bit, making combat a bit more of a challenge for 2 people, as opposed to being like a walkover.
Right, so now I have to fight dudes across dimensions. That's how epic this game gets.
Yes, and there were some changes made to how co-op is handled in Super Turbo Championship Edition. The biggest challenge for 2-player co-op in the original release was the dimensional play. When you're swapping the dimensions, specifically once you get the ability to control it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that was that both players had the ability, and when they were switching the dimensions back and forth, both players would switch even when only one of them pushed the button. So
how does it work now?
players can independently switch. So
Okay.
the second player can become just a shadow of themselves.
We
I
call
see.
it shadow swap
Yes.
because it looks like it sounds.
Because the problem with the co-op initially was, especially like once you get to the later platforming sections, player 2 is in the middle
Someone
of a jump.
would keep ruining your platforms.
Yeah, exactly. You could have the rug pulled out from under you. So now, player 2 can be mid-jump. He'll swap himself so he goes through a wall and makes it safely, while player 1 is completely not affected by that. So it really lets the two players play side by side and yet oddly independently too.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm like hardwired because I've played this game so many times. I'm hardwired to like just use a natural dimension swap, just swapping the whole world. I wonder what it's like for Guacamelee players to always have shadow swap. It's like growing up with black and white TV and color TV.
I think
So I'm not sure how much you guys can talk about it, but I'm interested in Severed.
Ooh.
And I'm curious how the experiences that you guys had developing Guacamelee has influenced the development of Severed. If everybody in the chat is not familiar, DrinkBox this past spring announced their next game, Severed, which is very mysterious still. It's touch-based, right?
Yeah, we're aiming for some kind of touch interface. We're not sure which one yet. There's a few out there.
So what
it is
can
something
you tell
new for
us?
Nothing new to report right now that's not already out there. You know, we'll be making some announcements when we're ready to.
Yeah.
But it is something new for us. It's something infinitely exciting. We're all very, very excited about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that what we've learned through the development of Guacamelee and about the blob games as well is, you know, our processes are even further refined. So we feel we remain confident in what we're doing, and we feel really good about it. Once we released the teaser trailer earlier this year, we were really glad. We didn't know what people would think about it upon seeing it, but people seem to be psyched.
Yeah. It combines like two great games that I enjoy. One being Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and the other one being Fruit Ninja.
Those two games often appear in my head right next to each other. I think to myself, well, I hate Fruit almost as much as I hate Piston Honda. So...
Perfect. No, it's something we are very, very excited about, and you know, we want to just make sure we can tell another great story. We can do it in a very stylish way, and that it's something that's memorable to people. That's really like it's kind of our constant goals with no matter what project we're working on.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another quick 30-second break. We'll be back in just a second. Stick with us. And we can keep talking because a lot of people are still watching.
Cool.
Perfect. Once we get through this temple, we'll be heading into one of the brand new areas of the game, so I'm excited to see that.
Oh, awesome. All right. So, Jason, Matthew, we've been asking in the chat some bizarre, truly archaic pro wrestling trivia.
Oh my god.
to give away.
We have the chat closed.
Oh man, there you go. We've been doling out, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One codes based on how quickly people can answer bizarre questions. So I leave the next one up to you. We're going to give away a PlayStation 4 copy of the game, and I leave the trivia question to you guys. What would you like to ask via the chat?
Okay. Do I have to know the answer?
Yes, you do have to know the answer.
Oh, man. Oh, I do know the answer, but I think Jason's... Oh. Do you want I don't know. I've got a wrestling question. Jason's got a Guacamelee question.
All right, yeah, all right. Jason, throw in your Guacamelee question into the chat, and or actually no, just say it out loud.
Okay, say it.
Say it out loud, and we'll see whoever gets it right first in the chat is going to get their hands on a PS4 code.
Okay, sounds good. So the question for a download code for Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition is, so in the original Guacamelee, there is the character of El Presidente's daughter, who is the girl you're trying to save throughout the game. What is her name? It is in the game.
See, I don't even know this.
Neither do I. Oh my
It
god.
is in the game, and only the best of fans will know it. And if someone can get that right,
I don't even know if the internet knows this.
I don't think so. But all I'll say is that it's fair because it is in the game.
Okay. If nobody gets it, I've got a wrestling question as a backup.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
God, man, I have no clue. I thought, like, all right, we got a guess here. John41 says Carmelita.
That
Nice.
is not correct.
Not
That's a good
correct.
That is a great character in Sly Cooper, though.
It is
Oh.
not Kalaka.
guess. It is not Kalaka.
That would be weird.
Wow, this is awesome. I love it when somebody actually stumps the internet.
Damn.
Like, if you can stump Google. All right, we've got Rosa.
Rosa is not correct.
Oh my god.
Oh, this is fun.
Jason, this is the first time I've ever seen this happen.
I think it's fair if we let
This
people
is-
use Google.
Go ahead. I like I said, I don't think it's not even on Google though.
Yeah.
Her name is.
But like I said, it absolutely exists in the game.
All right, Okray in the chat is just guessing women's names now.
Can
That is just a variety of ladies' names.
I give a hint, maybe?
Yeah, you lay out a hint.
Does it start with an E?
It does not
Damn
start
it.
with an E. I see some people in the chat are requesting that we type in the question, so I can add that.
Oh, okay.
We'll type it in for anybody.
Does someone on Game of Thrones have that name?
No.
Is this going to turn into a game of Guess Who?
All right, Matthew, in the meantime, what is your wrestling question? This is also for PlayStation 4 copy of the game, everyone.
Okay. So, I used to watch some WWF when I was a kid. What are the names of the two Bushwhackers?
Oh, can you say that again, Matthew? Your audio got a little garbled there.
Okay, so there's this tag team back in the day. They're called the Bushwhackers. What are the names of both of them? They both had two first names, and they had a great walk. You should look up the Bushwhackers right now.
Matthew, I almost asked a Bushwhackers question earlier.
What?
I was so tempted because I started with a SummerSlam '89 question.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think we're in the same era there.
definitely.
I'm gonna type that one in as
It'll-
well. Oh, it's Luke. Yeah, Yodel's got it.
Luke and Butch is correct.
Yodel's got it. Yodel, check your private messages on Twitch for a PS4 code for Guacamelee. That is
I
awesome.
think an even more difficult question would be, what were the Bushwhackers called before they were called the Bushwhackers? I think they had like a different name.
Really?
Yeah, there's like Bushwhacker history out there.
I mean, I found the Bushwhackers appealing when I was like 7 years old because they did have the awesomest walk in the world, and
Yes.
they wore hats that had a bite taken out of the brim. Like there was,
They licked each other's heads.
they licked each other's heads. That is entertainment.
The sheepherders. Yeah,
Wow. God.
I guess because they were from New Zealand, they had these crazy accents.
All right. Yodel does not have a PlayStation 4. Yodel, do you have an Xbox One? We can provide you with an Xbox One code, and we'll pass on to DFDX2, who got the question right. DFDX2, we're going to send you a PS4 code because Yodel cannot redeem it. And has anybody guessed the name of El Presidente's daughter?
I've
That's
been
amazing.
watching and no one's gotten it yet.
I'm wondering if Jason's just making this up.
No.
Is it L-E-L-L-E, Presidente?
No.
That would be hilarious.
I no.
Okay, Jason just showed me the name and it kind of rings a bell.
Okay.
So, I think it's legit. Oh my god!
Oh, somebody got it.
But
Oh, what is it?
Proton.
Wait, where?
Lupita.
Oh, it's Lupita.
I think Proton might be a speedrun. I think I've seen his name on the leaderboards.
Proton. Nicely done.
Yeah, well done.
Her name appears in the ending. If you get the happy ending, you see an image, and her name is on a banner in the background.
Wow. Jason with the deep cut. I like it.
Excellent. I'm absolutely pleased someone got it. That's amazing.
It is not Cynthia.
That is super rad. That made my day.
All right. Let's shoot that. Yep, Proton, check your private messages here on Twitch. You have a PlayStation 4 code. Although, as a speedrunner, I have the suspicion that you already have multiple copies of this game. Is that?
Speedrunners are just the best people.
So, do you ever design around speedrunning? Do you think to yourself, this is something I'm going to make that is just to frustrate somebody who is trying to do this as quickly as possible?
No, because I've come to the conclusion that you can't. That's what makes them amazing. No matter what you build, no matter how you build it, they will find a way to break it or circumvent it, and that's why I love them.
Yeah, and even after we see them break it, we're like, let's just leave it in the game because it's not like everybody's going to do these speedrunning strats.
At the charity event, Summer Games Done Quick a couple weeks ago, which is one of my favorite things of the year because I love speedruns more than anything, watching the speedrun of Guacamelee Gold Edition was one of my favorite things I think I've ever seen.
What is the time? What is the world record right now?
Well, there's different world records because there's real time, which is where you record the time as the person's playing, or game time, which is what the game clock tells you at the end.
Mm.
And I'm trying to think of what that is right now with the official.
I think game time on PC, it's like 47 minutes.
47 minutes is insane.
Yeah. Well, they've found ways to like warp from one area to the next just by like exploiting menus and whatnot. It's nuts.
All right, El Duke has a great question. What is the biggest game-breaking move that you guys have seen from these speedrunners? What is the biggest way that somebody has found to play this game that you just did not think of at all?
You guys got to promise not to use this. For me, it was this ability called swap hopping, where you can like jump infinitely without having like wall run. So before you have wall run, you can like access these areas where you would need wall run to go. Yeah.
Swamp hopping was probably one of my favorite things from the speedrun. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have another question from John41 here. Says, did you ever deal with level design where players would get permanently stuck and then you had to redesign the level?
Sure, not really. Usually, especially with a Metroidvania game where it's very non-linear, it twists and turns in different directions, it's less of a problem of people getting permanently stuck, more of a problem of people not knowing the way to go, so they would retread and go backwards through a level. There had lots of times where I would set something up. In fact, if we get into the canal level, I can show one of those instances. That's right at the very beginning.
We just find the sad man with his barrel collection.
Oh yes, Juanito and his barrel collection. That's so sad. Yeah, at the beginning of the canal, when we get there, I can show an example. But yeah, it really is a matter of the level twists and turns and goes off in different directions. And as you see people playing it, you see how they get lost. So with a Metroidvania game, it's more about you worry about players getting lost and not knowing where to go instead of getting permanently stuck. I can't think of any time people did get stuck. It was really, like I said, for me, my biggest concern is people who get lost. And usually they're permanently stuck because they're just going in the same circles over and over again.
Right. It's really like you have to, because you have to be visually communicating the entire time. You can't just say you're supposed to go this way, because that takes away from the satisfaction a little bit, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we do kind of tell people where to go, but that's all on the minimap, and a lot of people just don't open the minimap ever.
Really?
They get lost. Yeah. Which is unfortunate, because there's like arrows and stuff pointing to where you should go.
Yeah. Cirrus654 actually has a really, really good follow-up question to that, which is, you worry about that moment that a player is going to get lost and not know where to go. But this is sort of more like if you get lost in your own design. He asks, from a game maker to another, were there any designs in the game where you felt defeated and had to go back to the drawing board with a puzzle? Like a puzzle was just not coming together?
Sure. Yeah, there's tons. There's so many level designs. There's so many rooms.
Oh, whoops.
That are left on the drawing room floor. Right here in the forest, I'll sidebar for a quick sec. I'm seeing there's an arena right now where you're fighting skeletons, and then these saw blades start sneaking out of the walls.
Yeah, I noticed that a little too late the first time.
This is something that's brand new in... you just died. Yeah, this is something that's brand new in Super Turbo Championship Edition. And this was the beginnings of exploring this. You're trapped in a room, you're fighting skeletons, but what if skeletons weren't the only thing you had to worry about?
Right. But I mean, I can toss them in here and make my life a little easier.
Ludwig, you live your entire life based around the premise of skeletons are not the only thing you're going to have to worry about, right?
Exactly. But remember, skeletons are more scared of you than you are of them.
Always true. You have nothing to fear but skeletons themselves.
Oh, good.
In terms of designs, though, yeah, there's lots of times, and it's for lots of different reasons. Sometimes it's just the most common, and the one that kills something quicker than anything else, is immediately not being fun. The second the feedback is, this isn't fun, that's an instant killer.
I love that transformation animation of the goat.
Yes. White Chivo's animations are really they're amazing.
Formidable Jedi has a question that was always on the tip of the tongue, and you kind of have to ask: Will we see Guacamelee 2? Will there be a Guacamelee 2? It seems like the kind of thing that demands a sequel.
It seems like it demands it, yeah.
I mean, we're focused on what we're working on right now. If ultimately it comes down, whether it's a sequel or a new IP, it goes through the same process. Mm-hmm. If we feel we have something that's worthwhile, we'll do it.
Yeah.
If we think we have a great idea for a sequel and we're like, no, that's what we want it to be, and that's really something special, we'll do it for sure. But we won't do it for the sake of doing it. That defeats it.
And this is the new Intenso power, right?
Yes.
It's like a power-up
So Intenso
state. This lets you pound people.
It does. It's your overdrive mode. It's your extra strength mode. And really, what the thought behind it was, if we want to introduce a new move, why not introduce a new move that complements every other move in the game? So Intenso is an all-encompassing move. It makes you run, which could impact speedruns. It makes every one of your moves more powerful. It affects how they work. So really, for the price of one move, you actually you get an enhanced uppercut, an enhanced dash, an enhanced run.
Whoever thought of that was a genius. That's Jason. Jason's pointing at himself.
No.
Guys,
as with everything, it was a team effort.
Joystiq's resident Canadian, Zav D'Amatos, has hopped into the chat to recommend and request that you Torontoans have a delicious cup of Tim Hortons.
Oh my god, had one today.
Every morning.
Does that count? I don't like to drink it too often.
See, there's only one Tim Hortons in all of New York City, and it's like
Times Square.
Okay. There's one in Times Square, and there's one. At least there used to be in Union Square, and I think that one finally closed. And both of them are just they're not accessible enough for morning coffee. It's too far away.
That defeats its purpose.
I know.
That
It's
doesn't work.
brutal. Everybody, we have just about 60 seconds left in today's stream. Jason, Matthew, is there anything that you guys would like to, any words that you'd like to part with, anything that you'd like to say to everyone who's out there either playing Guacamelee or thinking about trying it that you want to tell them?
Sure. Anyone who's played it before, anyone who's playing it for the first time, just like with the first game, a lot of love went into it. There's a lot of new stuff for people. And I was putting the feelers out today on Twitter, and I'm really hoping someone out there can get 101%. There's some deep, deep secrets in the game, and I'm waiting until someone can crack them. But overall, we just hope everyone really enjoys the game. It's been a long road, and Guacamelee is fantastic, and we hope everyone enjoys it.
Yeah, Jason, you took the words right out of my mouth.
All right. Well,
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Make sure you follow us on Twitter at drinkboxstudios.com.
I was literally just about to go.
Oh, yeah.
The social network litany.
And we just got to one of the new areas, so
Ooh.
it's well timed. Hopefully, people will want to. This will be a tease, and people will want to try some more of it.
Yes.
There's a boat in it.
There's a boat.
And creepy fish.
Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. Thank you so much for hopping on the call. We're big fans of DrinkBox, and we're happy to see you guys still working and just plugging away at things.
Well, yeah,
thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, this is fun.
Everybody, if you enjoyed today's stream, we're going to be back at our usual time on Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be playing a horror game called The Long Dark, which is
Excellent.
I started that.
4 p.m. EST, right here. It's going to be me and Richard Mitchell, Joystiq's reviews content director, and that's going to be super cool. And we might actually have a special stream on Friday as well, right, Letting?
That's right. We're trying to get Counter Spy.
Which, if you guys have not tried it, it is super... It's this awesome Vita and PlayStation 4 game that looks like a really weird old comic book, and you shoot people. Which is just novel in video games. You never ever see guns. So we'll be back then. You can follow DrinkBox on Twitter. It's at DrinkBox Studios. You can follow Joystiq on Twitter and Facebook and Google+. I don't know if you guys knew this, but people use Google+. Like, a lot of people. It's very strange. But yeah, search Joystiq with a Q on all of those places. And if you guys use Google+, that is awesome, and I love you for doing it. And go to joystiq.com. Right now, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. We've existed for 10 years, and we are running videos for the entire staff, lovingly crafted by Zav D'Amatos, that are looking back at our 10 favorite games of the past 10 years. So go do that, and yeah, thanks again, guys. We'll see everybody on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Guys.
Glad to take it.